Perfect. Okay, so we move on to the last speaker of the first session of today. Where having heard so much about Komnenos and the reigns of Michael I and Theodore, it is good to push past them onto what comes next. So I introduce Samuel Cowell, who is at the University of Vienna, who is a late Byzantine numismatist with expertise from 1204 to 1351, who's been putting together his own project upon this that encompasses the coinages of the Latin Empire, Thessaloniki, Nicaea, Trebizond, and then post-1261 Paleologan. He has two publications already out called The Classification of the Aspiron AR Traki Reverse Dies of Mammon I Megas Komnenos, and two unpublished Paleologan tornaces. And
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me all right? Is the audio coming through? Perfect. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Ilya for the wonderful presentation that preceded what I'm about to do. I think they'll go together very well. So what I've been doing is more studying the iconography of the coinage and the implications of what the designs tell us. So I think that it's very complementary towards studying the hoard finds also. Two different sides of a coin, for the pun. Let me see if I can skip ahead here. Perfect. So my outline, I've got two different sections. So the first section is going to be looking at numismatic self-expressions of the Nicaean and Epirote power relationship. So this will actually be a case study of two different coins, one minted under Vatatzes in Thessaloniki and one coin minted under Michael II in Arta, that show how the two different sides of the Byzantine world presented a singular event from their different perspectives. And then part two will actually be looking at a reattribution of the coinage of Michael I and Michael II. So I've got some sources
Recording
here.
in progress.
But I think Ilya has done a very good job of going over the sources, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that since they've already been covered. But just to share about sort of where my research is coming from and what I've been working on, my project is titled the Corpus Numorum Byzantinorum Recentissimorum, or CNB, and it's going to be a brand new cataloging system. So we saw the last really comprehensive late Byzantine catalog came out with Hendy in Dumbarton Oaks Volume 4. We also have from Leontia, LBC, looking at the Ashmolean Museum covering that, but again, that's more or less just applying the Dumbarton Oaks catalog system to the Ashmolean collection as opposed to presenting new ideas. And then we've also got the CLBC volume that's come out recently, but really there's been a lack of research in the idea of presenting a new systematic catalog that goes over brand new types. And so for the volume 1 that's going to be coming out hopefully by the end of 2025, we're looking at doing a holistic overview of the Byzantine world in the 13th century. So that's going to include the coinage of Nicaea, Thessaloniki, and Epiros, of course, the Latins, and then also Trebizond, and then maybe, if I've got enough time, to also include Bulgaria in that picture. But this will include over 750 coin entries and over 100 previously unpublished coins. So we're looking at brand new research with implications for the overview of what emperors minted and actually shedding light on new types. This volume will also actually include a regalia variant development study, which is very important. So we kind of see over time that different emperors are using different regalia. And by studying this, we can track how this changes over time. And this also helps us to then identify unpublished coins. So when you have certain regalia combinations, we can then see and quantify statistically that this regalia actually matches to this emperor. And then also an overhaul of the billion trachea module system. That was touched on by Ilya a little bit, but research shows that we actually have sort of the smallest trachea module showing up in Nicaea, actually, under Theodore I Lascaris and also John III Vatatzes. So implications about where the actual smallest billion trachea started. There seems to be a more widespread usage of that than initially expected. And anyway, this has been a while in development, and I'm hoping to get this published by late 2025, and then future volumes will also cover the Paleologan state, Cyprus, Rhodes, Serbia, Bulgaria, and more. So that's just a little bit about the research. And then just kind of a sample of what that might look like. I've also included line drawings. You'll see some of these throughout the presentation. And the idea with line drawings is that, of course, anyone who's worked with late Byzantine coins knows how objectively awful they are. They're horribly struck, oftentimes double, triple struck. They've got a crude style. It's difficult to make out what's going on. So the idea of having a line drawing actually is then going to be to sort of show the coin type as it would look in a perfect state. That also helps us to appreciate the iconography a little bit better and then to compare and contrast between different types. Whereas, of course, if you're just working with plated coins, you might have to have 4 or 5 examples to show off an entire design, whereas a drawing will get all that information across in one picture. Anyway, yeah, so that's a little bit about the project and where this is coming from, and now we're going to dive into the numismatic self-expressions of the Nicaean and Epirate power relationship. So to start this off, we'll be looking at a very well-known type, a series here, that is from John III Vatatzes and Michael II from Thessaloniki. And this type is actually comprised of two different issues with the same reverse. One features St. Michael on the obverse, the other features the Theotokos in the Oran's position. And it's a very interesting coin. So we know from the sources of Acropolites, he mentions, of course, the alliance between Thessaloniki and Nicaea, the betrothal of Maria and Nicephorus. And so we know from this also that from that point onwards in the source, Michael II is given the title of despot, and his previous mentions in Acropolites do not have that title. So the implication, therefore, is that through this alliance, John III Vatatzes actually grants Michael II the title of despot through this alliance and betrothal. And so we actually see this represented on the coins, so where if we look at the reverse here, we see on the left-hand side, we've got a junior figure wearing the chlamys and also a despot's crown. And he is actually being crowned by a right senior figure, which is the figure of John III Vatatzes, recognizable from his forked beard. He's wearing a simplified lauros and the normal stemma of the emperor. So it's a very interesting numismatic scene that actually portrays and captures a moment in time, an alliance between Epirus and Thessaloniki. And we also know that this specific coin series, these two types, come from Thessalonica. This is from the style of the coins. We see the way John is engraved. And then also some of the obverse sigla markings are connected to different issues of John. So we can confidently place these two issues in Thessalonica. And all of that will be important for the comparison, because what's going to be compared to the Thessalonica type is actually an uncertain from Arta. And so this coin hitherto has been mentioned as unidentified. We know that from the style, it belongs to the corpus of Michael II. Generally, we see the very elongated features. The emperor has got a long, drawn-out neck. His limbs are quite extended. The style is very thin and small for the figures. When we compare this to earlier Thessaloniki styles or from Nicaea, we see it's very different. So from that, we can actually identify that this comes from Arta. And by examining some of the coin specimens, we actually see legend fragments that come through. So we see here an omega in the legend and also a delta. And of course, for John on the coinage of this period, when he's mentioned and represented, we know that he gets a barred abbreviation of the iota and omega. Sort of what we see in manuscripts also for barred abbreviations. This is also on the coinage. And so the presence of this omega in this spot very likely indicates that this is actually a coin identifying John as a senior right figure, which again, in comparison of the iconography of this scene with the earlier type, would make a lot of sense. And then the delta that follows also allows us to see that this likely indicates the title of despot following the legend. And so previous speculation about this coin has included that it might show John III Vatatzes crowning Michael II, but there's also been some speculation that it shows St. Constantine crowning Michael II. And so if we look with that legend, the omega and the delta, we can then see that it's not going to be Constantine with the legend that wouldn't fit. And again, with the omega, we can then sort of therefore conclude that the right figure must be John. And then, of course, at the other side of the legend, we're going to see the mu coming through, which would be either in this period Manuel or Michael. But again, given the context of this, the style, and then also the identification of the right figure as John, it would seem to be a very solid hypothesis that this coin then represents John III and Michael II. And so what makes this so interesting is that if the hypothesis holds true of the right coin being from Arta, showing the scene of John III Vatatzes crowning Michael II, we're sort of seeing two different ideas of propaganda and representations of the power dynamic between Thessaloniki and Nicaea, between Epirus and Nicaea, sort of shown on two different perspectives and two different coins. The left type is from Thessalonica, and at this time it's controlled by John III Vatatzes. So when Vatatzes is minting his coins, he is sort of showing the message that he wants to send. He controls the mint. And of course, here we see on the Thessalonican issue, despot Michael II is a very junior figure. He noticeably, if we go to the next slide, I made some drawings, he actually has a different crown. So in this period in the numismatics, the emperor or the senior figures are going to have the normal stemma, the normal crown. And Michael II actually has the stemmatogirion, which is in Pseudo-Candides, that's seen as sort of a despot's arched crown. And it's of a noticeably junior rank. So immediately by glancing at the coins, we can see that from the Thessalonica type, Michael II is actually immediately recognizable from his regalia as a junior figure, whereas in Thessalonica, for the type John III Vatatzes is in the simplified lauros, wearing the normal stemma, he is identifiable as a senior figure. But in comparison to Arta, When Michael II is actually minting his own coins, he presents himself as the full standard normal imperial figure. Besides the poses of the two, Michael II would actually be indistinguishable in the art of coin from John III, as in they're wearing the exact same loros pattern, the exact same stemma. And so what we can conclude from that is that in the Thessalonica viewpoint, Michael II is seen as being below John III Vatatzes. It's through John III crowning Michael that Michael actually receives his power and his base, and that from the Thessalonican, Nicaean-controlled viewpoint, John III Vatatzes' viewpoint, John III is clearly the senior figure, clearly through his abilities. He is the one who's able to grant Michael the title of despot, and that title is given from the senior figure, from the Nicaean figure, and only through Nicaea is that title valid. Whereas from the Arta perspective, the Epirote perspective, Michael II presents himself actually as a sort of a standalone figure. From his regalia, it's seen he's wearing the normal simplified loros, which is matching that of John. And so that from that, we can kind of see from the Epiros perspective, even though John III Vatatzes is coming in to crown him and grant him a title, Vatatzes is more of a first among equals in the Epirote mindset, whereas from the Nicaean, Thessalonican-controlled mindset, Vatatzes is clearly the superior figure. And this is just sort of one example of what might be an interesting investigation into the iconography of the period, and sort of highlighting that when we sort of go deeper and study the style of the coins and the meanings behind them, we can actually sort of pull out real context, real findings from the power dynamics at play. And so next up, after that case study, we're going to be looking at reattributing the coinage of Michael I and Michael II. And so here we have sort of what I would call the solo coinage of Michael, what's been treated in the literature as a coinage Michael has minted by himself in Arta. What we looked at earlier were two types that are the coronation issues, where we have John III Vatatzes at play, but this is sort of the coinage of just Michael II by himself. And I think through some stylistic breakdowns, we can actually sort of reattribute this coinage and show that a number of types are actually from Michael I and not Michael II. And so the first style group, A, is actually the style group that matches very closely to the Arta coin we looked at earlier, where Vatatzes crowns Michael II. Again, we see the elongated neck, the elongated limbs. We see that the figures are sort of very disproportionate, very elongated. They're very crude, and also what we would expect for the time period, this being 1248 onwards, when Michael would mint his own coinage, we're going to see the smallest modules, smaller flans, cruder styles, sort of in line with the John I Doukas coinage, something around that area. And style group B is very different. Again, right now these are treated as being from the same emperor in the same time period, but style group B actually has large silver coins. The silver coins are going to be about 4 grams or up, which would be extremely unusual for this period, this time. Again, the style is much more refined. We see the proportions are very accurate from what we would expect, very much in line with the early 13th century. We're going to see that actually comparing the loros, the simplified loros, the part that wraps around the emperor's torso, around his stomach, his chest, and wraps around his arm. For style group A, we see this 5 dots. It's very simple. In this period, when you have the loros in this design, the simplest way to represent that we see is the 5 dots. And you have different degrees of complexity that go beyond that. But at the very basic level, the most simple, most crude loros we see is just 5 dots. And for style group A, that's what's present. Style group B, though, it's very different. We actually have a decorated loros, where you have sort of an X going through there with a dot in the center. And then between each 2 beams of the X, we have an extra dot. So just to highlight that this is going to be a very complex loros, more attention paid, more detailed. And again, the more detailed loros, the more detailed coins are going to be in association with the well-proportioned figures, the more realistic figures, whereas the very crude figures, elongated figures, have the simplified loros. So we can very clearly distinguish there is a big difference between style group A and style group B. And so when we investigate style group B, again, these are all still identified as coins of Michael II, but close examination actually shows that it might be something otherwise. And so for this, we can see here that the coinage of Michael II, there's actually obverse sigla from the mint markings that show a connection to the coinage of Theodore I. And I'm not the first to notice this. Hendy actually points this out in Dumbarton Oaks, but the proposed schema from Hendy is that Theodore the First Komnenos Doukas in the 1220s, he mints the late 1220s. He mints silver coinage with the sigla for Arta Castra as the assumed interpretation of that. And then that this sigla goes away. Manuel the First Komnenos Doukas, he mints a select amount of silver coins, not very many. Then his successor, John the First Doukas, mints no silver coins. His successor, Demetrius the First, mints no silver coins. And then Hendy proposes that Michael II starts minting silver coins again with the same sigla, which would seem a very convoluted timeline, that you would have a very early emperor mint quantities of silver, then his successors don't use this, and then 20, 30 years down the road, it's picked up again. My proposal is that instead of seeing Theodore mint these, having a 20, 30-year gap, and then Michael II resurrects it, it would make significantly more sense that Michael I actually mints these. Michael I uses the same sigla, and then we see a sigla connection from the same mint between two succeeding emperors. This seems to be a more logical conclusion than seeing what Hendy proposes, which would be a 20 or 30-year gap between multiple emperors. And again, like I said, in Thessalonica and Epirus, you really don't see any silver coins. Emmanuel mints a few, but they're very scarce, not common at all. And then again, for John Doukas, we see none. For Demetrius, we see none. So it would seem very illogical to assume that Theodore I mints this, 30 years go by, and then it's resurrected again through Michael II, as opposed to looking at this from Michael I, a direct continuation at the mint from Michael I to Theodore I. And also we see that this silver type, the one allegedly minted by Michael II, is actually directly copying a coin type of Alexius III. And that's the leftmost coin here that we see. And of course, Alexius III, he is sort of the final Byzantine emperor to rule before the Fourth Crusade for any long period of time. And from a numismatic standpoint, he mints large quantities of coins that are seen in hoards all throughout the later period. So it would make a lot of sense that for Michael I, sort of rejuvenating, restarting a mint after the Fourth Crusade, that he would then look to the immediate predecessor of Alexius III and copy his types. So again, I think that when we look at the general stylistic grounds again, these figures are well proportioned. It's got the more detailed, elaborate loros. That makes more sense for Michael I and Michael II. When we look at the obverse sigla, the connection to Theodore I, the timeline would make much more sense from Michael I to Theodore, as opposed to Theodore, a 20, 30-year gap, and then Michael II. And then also copying Alexius III would make significantly more sense for Michael I as opposed to Michael II. So I think for those reasons, I would reattribute this silver coin from Michael II all the way to Michael I. And of course, we also know that Michael I did mint a silver coin type in Arta, so it would actually make a lot of sense that there was a variety there as opposed to this sort of 30-year gap and then having Michael II mint something down the road. Anyway, again, a different coin in the same stylistic group. This is also a coin type attributed to Michael II. And I do apologize for the slightly lower quality photos. I was actually at Dumbarton Oaks over the summer, and this was from my mobile phone, pictures I took. There haven't been any professionally taken photos for a while, but I thought it's better to have these than some old plate that's kind of grainy. So if the pictures are a little bit blurry, I apologize for that. But what we see again is that for the alleged Michael II type here on the left, we can compare this to a confirmed Michael II type on the right. And what I mentioned too of sort of the well-proportioned figures with the detailed loros compared to a small, slender, elongated figure, we see that here in juxtaposition to where the emperor on the left coin type, the left Billion coin type, he's got a very detailed loros, well-proportioned, of a fine style. The figure on the right Billion coin type, very elongated. Once again, the 5-dot simplified loros and very crude. And then we compare St. Michael, we see that St. Michael on the left coin actually has what you might call maybe a little bit of a beer belly, a large stomach there coming through, whereas the Michael Archangel on the right, he's got a very thin, very elongated torso. So again, the style between these two coins, the one on the left, which is an alleged Michael II, and the one on the right, which is a confirmed Michael II, are very different. And when we then compare the alleged Michael II on the left to known Michael I types, we see that the obverse style again is very similar. Even though this Billion type does not identify this particular Christ as Christ Emmanuel, we see again the youthful face, the large forehead, sort of the puffed up cheeks and chin, and the actual Christ depiction is very similar to that of the known AR types of Michael I. And then we also compare the detailed loros. Again, that's not something seen on Michael II very often, so it would make much more sense with Michael I. And also comparing the portrait, the style of the engraving for the face between the alleged Michael II and a known Michael I. We can sort of conclude from all that this must be, again, a type of Michael I and not Michael II. The style matches Michael I. The Loros, the details all match Michael I. Again, it's very unlike the known types of Michael II, and it would make much more sense that this piece then, also in style group B, would belong to Michael I and not Michael II. And sort of a very similar principle here. Another type where we've got a detailed emperor with a finely engraved Loros, well proportioned. The coin reads Michael. It was placed under Michael II, but given what I've argued before, the same principles are still at play. It would seem to be much more likely that this coin is of Michael I, given the stylistic connections and the detail. And so with that out of the way, we've kind of looked at style group A, style group B, and why style group B would also belong to Michael I, not Michael II. There is also a numismatic misunderstanding to address. And so this is a very interesting case where the same coin type was cataloged twice under two different emperors. And we see that on the top, we've got a coin of Manuel I Komnenos Doukas, sort of a large module 1 piece, and the bottom is going to be the intermediate module. And for the chlamys, we see that the intermediate module is slightly different. It's not necessarily copied, but it's a known variant. And the intermediate module has been actually attributed twice to both Manuel and Michael. And I think the reason for this is that the star and moon, crescent moon symbolism is actually associated with Michael II. It has not been until recently that we've found some examples with Manuel sharing this coin type. But I've gone through and demonstrated what I mean. This is both from LBC. This is Leontia's work from the Ashmolean Museum. We see here in the top left, this is LBC 350. This is cataloged as Manuel I Doukas, and the bottom right is LBC 471, Manuel II Doukas. And if we look, it's actually the exact same coin design. There's no tangible difference whatsoever. Just somehow certain coins were attributed one way and certain coins the other way. And in my research, what I've found is that the large module, of course, has a legend Manuel, and every intermediate module coin that has a legend surviving is also Manuel. And it seems to be the ones that have no legend surviving are attributed to Michael, but there's no real grounds for that. It would seem to me that the intermediate module must belong to Manuel, and this is a simple mistake of sort of cataloging the same coin type twice. And so in effect, that all the intermediate modules must be from Manuel and not Michael, given that it's a known type from Manuel and that none of the intermediate modules actually have a legend surviving with Michael. And of course, this is an easy mistake to make, especially with these crude legends. You often have just one or two letters surviving on a coin. You might think that a Manuel reads a Michael, but again, pointing out the double cataloging, we see it's the exact same coin type given two different references. That misunderstanding should be clarified, and that this coin is actually just a Manuel and not Michael. And so what this means is that the rather wide picture of coin types under Michael II is narrowed down by a good bit. So from the initial 6 types that we see here, really only 2 actually belong to Michael II. And again, this is sort of what we would expect style-wise for the period, for the 1240s, 50s, 60s maybe even perhaps, that we have very elongated, crude figures, very simplified regalia, the Loros again being very simple, the 5 dots, and that for the other coins, which are very fine style, also named Michael, given the sigla and mint connections to Michael I, given the style connections to Michael I, and given the regalia connections to Michael I, it would make much more sense that those 3 types are attributed to Michael I, not Michael II. And as mentioned, the one coin is also a numismatic understanding. So from that, we actually eliminate 4 types from Michael II and are left with 2. This also means, though, inversely, even though we have fewer coins now for Michael II, I think that it's going to be a very exciting time to study Michael I, as his numismatic output seems to be much larger than initially expected. So lots of interesting takeaways from all of this, and I hope the conversation was very interesting. As mentioned, I thought it would be fun to open up with a case study to kind of see the power dynamic relationship implications from the study of the iconography, and then 2, sort of looking at the coinage of Michael I, Michael II, and sort of seeing how a lot of confusion can exist in the numismatic field and trying to clarify that. But yeah, I hope it was an interesting conversation. If anyone has any questions, please let me know. I've also included my website down there you can find for the catalog I mentioned I'm working on. Eventually that'll be free online. It'll be on that website too, as well as in a published book form. So anyone who's interested can find my information there. Thank you.